What up, everyone? This is Mr. Lord Dark Professor Dark Joker with this week's video. And this week, I'm going to go over some recent information that's come out about, some stuff regarding Bob Iger, Kathleen Kennedy with Star Wars. Go over what's fact, what's fiction, you know, all the information about, their respective careers, the rumors that have been discussed, and what we do know, and my conclusions regarding all of it. So, is there an actual conflict between the two? And what had what role did each of them play in the death of Star Wars, which is dead? So, with all that being said, on with the video. First off, I'm going to explain Bob Iger's career. So, early on in his life, he worked as a weatherman while living in Ithaca, New York, and he did menial labor when he started at ABC. Now, when the Winter Olympics were in Calgary, he was appointed the senior program executive for those Olympics at ABC, and then he later became the head of ABC in 1989. And he went through serious promotions, and by the time Disney had bought ABC, he was promoted to chairman of ABC. And he held the title of Disney CEO from 2005 to 2020. Then he took a break where he was executive chairman from 2020 to 2022, while Bob Chapek was CEO and in essence the fall guy. Because let's be real, I like the return of Iger in 2022, and he still holds title CEO. That was planned. That was like I think it was Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers. He said that he believed that Iger's using Chapek's the fall guy. He plans to come back. I agreed with him. I agree with them. And Jeremy was proven right about that, and I agreed. I, you know, I was like, when I heard Jeremy say, I was like, yeah, that actually makes sense. Disney's was about to have a low point financially. The fallout of, basically Chapek was dealing with the fallout of a lot of Iger's decisions. Now that doesn't excuse Chapek for his decisions that led to Disney's like downfall. They excuse Chapek, but it was basically almost all Bob Iger's, leadership that led to the stuff that happened to Disney. And so yeah, and of course, in regards to Star Wars, Bob Iger bought Lucasfilm in 2012. One of multiple acquisitions Bob Iger's been involved with. Of course, Marvel, Fox, you know, yeah, Bob Iger likes to buy stuff. He doesn't innovate. He only buys. And of course, outside Disney, while he's been there, he's been board member at Apple from 2011 to 2019. He's been at Perfect Day since 2020 and Genie's Inc. since 2022. Kathleen Kennedy. So earlier in career, she was an assistant to John Milius, who, whenever he was Steven Spielberg's executive producer for the movie 1941, and that's kind of how she got to know Spielberg, and that led to her becoming Spielberg's secretary. Where basically she was given producer credits on a lot of films that were made by Spielberg, George Lucas, and Kennedy's husband Frank Marshall. Basically the only thing she actually could produce was a cup of coffee. I mean, and hey, that is an important thing though. Making coffee is important. I mean, I don't like coffee, but people gotta get caffeine. Anyway, but since 2012, she's been the president of Lucasfilm. Basically, George Lucas chose her for that role for whatever reason. I Yeah. I mean, obviously Kennedy had worked with Lucas, and that definitely did contribute. And Spielberg was probably too old to take the job, and basically, and obviously Dave Filoni was really had only done TCW, so he had no executive experience, so there wasn't really a reason to put Dave Filoni as president of Lucasfilm. But anyway, so yeah, so for whatever reason, George Lucas appointed Kennedy as president, and then she stayed president when Disney bought the company. and basically Lucas sold it. Basically, Kennedy was president and all that stuff, and has overseen the destruction of Star Wars. It's a dead franchise. Obviously she has become basically one of the most hated figures at Lucasfilm. Like basically amongst all people that the Star Wars fandom hates, she is the most hated. Like far as like people work at Lucasfilm involved with Star Wars. Like yeah. Now let's go into like what we know regarding all the information that's come out recently. So, one thing that's been known for all that there were films planned out for Obi-Wan Kenobi and Boba Fett, and those were reworked into TV shows. And then season 4 of The Mandalorian was reworked into The Mandalorian and Grogu. Basically, which Mandalorian Grogu will be the first Star Wars movie in theaters since 2019 with The Rise of Skywalker. And there's been recent information about a pitch that of a pitch script, like a completed script for the hunt for Ben Solo that would have taken place after the Rise of Skywalker. Like somehow Ben Solo returns. Bob Iger rejected that pitch, and then since the Clone Wars was brought to some recent info, so the Clone Wars 2008 was canceled in 2013. You know, shortly after Disney bought Lucasfilm, it was canceled in 2013 after its final season on Cartoon Network. Season 6 released on Netflix in 2014, and then 2020 the show returned for season 7 on Disney Plus. And there's been a bunch of projects that have been announced. Very few have released. There's been a few cancellations. Some that, while not officially canceled, they're canceled. Like the Ryan Johnson trilogy, that's not happening. I don't think the Ray movie is happening. It hasn't been officially canceled. I don't think they'll ever announce that one's officially canceled. Same to Ryan Johnson trilogy. I don't think it's happening Starfire does really well. I don't think the Ray movie has any chance of actually releasing. And then recently you have Den of Nerds, so a YouTube channel, was told by a source of his that, apparently, regards to the Hunt for Solo, regards to some other stuff like TCW and some other release stuff that Disney's done with Star Wars, Bob Iger was undermining Kennedy. Basically, like a lot of the creative decisions were actually his decisions, and basically he wanted a quick release of films and stuff to like basically churn out a bunch of content, and that is what Damn Nerd Source told him. That basically all the issues with Star Wars has actually been Bob Iger's fault instead of Kennedy's fault. That is what the claims were. You know, whether or not that's true or not, we don't know exactly how everything went. I have my doubts, which I'll get into next. Now for my personal conclusions regarding all the information. So, okay, so regards to the quick release of films and stuff. So, keep in mind, in the 2010s, Disney had a really good run with the MCU. Like all these movies come out, you would have multiple movies a year. So you have different various movies in a short period of time. So Iger probably wanted Star Wars to do the same thing. He probably was wanting to churn out that level of quantity, and basically with Star Wars to get like billions of dollars for different movies a year. I mean, that was the plan. And you can understand from a business perspective why Iger wanted that to happen. Now, the difference is, of course, there's a difference between Star Wars and MCU. Like, basically, MCU just due to, like, you have different comic series. So you have different sub series within Marvel that you can do that gives more room for that kind of thing. Star Wars, not so much. There is a lot more difficult to do that with Star Wars. Like, basically, like, there's a lot, like, there's a lot that you have to do with that. Like, even if you actually were adapting the EU faithfully, doing that kind of churn like that would be difficult with Star Wars, even if you actually were looking at source material, which Catholic Kennedy denied existed. Now, as far as Obi-Wan Kenobi and Boba Fett, so the films being reworked to shows, I think Iger could have made that decision, but the reason is he did that, could do that, would have been promote Disney Plus. Keep in mind when Disney Plus was relatively new while development. So Disney Plus had been planned out for years, and so probably while development for the movies for Obi Wan Kenobi Boba Fett were going on, and then during development the TV shows for each of them, Disney Plus was a new streaming service. So Iger probably wanted to promote, the streaming service, get subscribers, especially with the success of The Mandalorian, and like season one and season two, and so I believe he wanted to use those shows for Boba Fett and Obi Wan, high profile, well received characters from the original trilogy and prequels to promote Disney Plus. That I think would be his motivation. So from a business perspective, I think that's why he did. Now, as far as Mandalorian Grogu being a reworked version of season Mandalorian season four, here's why I think that could happen. Why Iger could have made that decision. Season three had low ratings. Now, why? Well, season three released after Obi Wan. If you look at the ratings for Star Wars, like all Star Wars projects, like shows and stuff, if you look at the ratings before Obi Wan Kenobi and after Obi Wan Kenobi, like you could tell there's just a drop. Like it's like the relevance that Star Wars had, like before and after Kenobi, is a vast difference. Like Mandalorian season three did not get good ratings. Seasons one and two did. Season three did not. I mean, that's part of the reason why Andor got such bad ratings for both seasons. They both came after Obi Wan, and season two's case, it also came after the Acolyte, so that added on to it. And after Ahsoka, in the case of Andor season two. Now as far as for why Mandor and Grogu is the main movie, well, keep in mind there hasn't been a movie since 2019. So no movies, and based on the recent financial information about the Rise of Skywalker, there hasn't been a profitable Star Wars movie since 2017 with The Last Jedi. That piece of crap. So yeah, so with all that info, you could see why. And so basically, Iger was probably concerned about Mandalorian season four getting low ratings and that causing Disney Plus to lose subscribers. So he was probably wanting to get box office money with Mandalorian Grogu to make up for it because box office is important. Just like I mean, guess yeah, Disney Plus is a does not make profits like it, due to the amount the budgets they give those shows. So you can see why, from a business perspective, why Mandalorian Grogu was done as a movie instead of a four-season Mandalorian. So I think Iger was making business decisions. Now, as far as all the creative stuff, that was Kathleen Kennedy. Kathleen Kennedy did delegate a lot of that to the Lucasfilm Story Group, Dave Filoni, Ryan Johnson, J.J. Abrams, Leslie Headland, a lot of stuff. So all the creative stuff, all the problems there, that's Kennedy. Iger, I don't think cares about story. I do not think Iger cares. Like, he is strictly a money guy. Now, he's not the best with money. He's good at spending money. He's shown he's not necessarily great at making it, like making his business profitable. He's good at spending a lot of money and buying stuff, but he is not. Iger does not deal with creative decisions. That is Kathleen Kennedy's thing. Now, I think Iger could have agreed with prioritizing Disney Star Wars characters over the George Lucas era characters, like original trilogy, prequel trilogy, expanded universe. Yes, I do think Iger agreed with that because so basically, from a business standpoint, there could be like royalties that would have to be paid to like George Lucas, a lot of the people. So For EU characters, there will probably royalties that have to be paid to the ones who wrote the books, comics, video games for those characters. And for the ones who wrote the trilogy, prequel trilogy, there's probably royalties that have to be paid to like, George Lucas, maybe some of the other people involved. I don't know. I don't know how those contracts work, but there's probably some royalties involved, and that is probably part of the motivation Iger would have agreed with prioritizing Disney's characters. Now we know why Candy prioritized that because of her ego. She wanted to make Star Wars hers, so she wanted to use her character. And for Iger's case, if Star Wars is able to stand on its own with Disney's characters, that could maybe prop up Disney stock. Say, hey, look what we did with Star Wars. So do the royalties and putting their own individual stamp on Star Wars, I could see why they prioritize Disney's character. Right or wrong, I think it's a wrong decision. Just make your money. Whatever royalties you have to pay, just pay it. I think financially they would have made more money by prioritizing original trilogy, characters, prequel trilogy, EU. I mean, that's more revenue. And as far as who deserves blame, let's be real. Both Bob Iger and Kathleen Kennedy deserve blame for the death of Star Wars. They both do deserve plenty of blame. But despite Bob Iger not using his authority, so Bob Iger is Kathleen Kennedy's boss, so he could supersede a lot of Kennedy's decisions if he had wanted to. But he is not a creative person. He does not. I don't see him getting involved in creative decisions. He just delegates. He just basically he just pays the basically pays salaries. That's all. That's all. Like now he deserves plain blame. He has Lear let things happen. Like when you let like basically if you just let the fires burn instead of fixing it with while being able to fix it, Iger deserves plenty of blame for that, for letting Star Wars burn to the ground when he could have superseded Kennedy and prevented a lot of what she wanted to do. But Kennedy, since she's the president of Lucasfilm, she deserves the most blame. She had the most direct involvement with hiring people who would do what she wanted. You know, while she may have written some very specific plot points, she delegated a lot of it, and she basically led Lucasfilm to the ground. Now, as far as Den of Nerds, I think he was just given bad info. I don't blame him. I think Den of Nerds, he was given, you know, he was given whatever information he was given to us as best as he could, and I don't blame him. Like he seems like a like he I, like seems like a respectable guy. I have no problem with him. Now, as far as his source, I don't know who his source is, so I can't say whether or not his source was whether or not the source was giving Dan Nerds bad info, like intentionally, or if the source himself was given bad info. Like maybe the source was lied to and unknowingly gave false info to Dan Nerds. Like so it may not be I don't think it's Dan Nerd's fault at all. I don't think it's him. And it's possible it's not the source's fault. It could be someone else's fault that the source is getting bad info because I would not be surprised. I surprised if Disney Lucasfilm was leaking different stuff to different people, you know, false and true, where it's pro Kennedy stuff, pro Iger stuff, anti Iger stuff, anti Kennedy stuff, to different sources and see how different people reacted to see how things go. Now, as far as why this is going on, so Bob Iger's reputation has gone down. So when he came back, everyone was like, "Oh yeah, Bob Iger's going to fix Bob Chapek's mistakes." All those people were based. I'll say they're freaking retards about that. I mean, like Bob Iger made the decisions that led to the fallout that occurred during Chapek's tenure. Does that excuse Chapek for his decisions? No. It's not, but Bob Iger made decisions that led to it. Chapek was just a fall guy. People who kept up with this stuff for years knew about how bad Iger was, and we were like, yeah, this was all planned. It ain't gonna go well for Iger, and it didn't go well for Iger. Iger's reputation went down, and I think Kathleen Kennedy, whose legacy has been destroyed by her role as president of Lucasfilm. Like her legacy is gone. It is gone. Like there is no. I think she's trying to salvage her legacy. The whole her going out, wanting to go out on a win, before she retires. I mean, look, she's in her 70s. She's not going to work at Lucasfilm for much longer. I mean, she's going to retire at some point, you know. So I think she wants to salvage her legacy, and could be having information sent out that favors her. You know, and basically it's all just like it's Hollywood. There's a lot of backstabbing going on. I think a lot Hollywood's not necessarily run by good people. Like they're not these aren't good and moral people. Like yeah, there's a lot of backstabbing going on. There's a lot of basically you know yeah, it's just basically Kennedy's trying to salvage her legacy is what I think's going on. That's why I think the source of all these rumors is going on. I do think Iger did make some decisions from a business perspective, but that's what they were, business decisions. Kennedy was the one making creative decisions. So, and I blame both of them for the death of Star Wars. They both deserve plenty of blame. Like, and Iger also deserves blame for the death of Marvel. You know, for all the bunch of the issue. Like, Iger is basically overseeing a bunch of stuff. While he may not have as much direct responsibility for some things, he has a lot of authority as the CEO of Disney, and he can make decisions that could fix some things, but he doesn't. He lets the problems happen, and basically is not willing to admit that there are problems. That's his fault. Kenny's fault directly in regards to Star Wars. That's all Kenny. That's Kenny's fault. So yeah, you know, there is as far as there a conflict between them. No, I don't think so. Now, if Kennedy is trying to take advantage of Iger's fallen reputation to, you know, salvage her legacy, could that lead to some conflict between them? Maybe. I don't know. But I think right now there is no conflict between them. They are lockstep in with each other regards to how they're going to how Star Wars is being run. You know, I would say it's already in the ground. It's being run below the ground at this point. And that's it. Did y'all like this video? Did you dislike this video? Do you agree with the takes I had? Do you think there is a conflict between Bob Iger, Kathleen Kennedy? Do you think there is not a conflict between them? Which was my conclusion. Whether you agree, disagree, dislike this video, put all that in the comments, like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. Look forward to the next video.